Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Book of Judges, our second step into the Book of Judges. I think our 63rd step in our walking tour through the Bible. Now, I just want to look at the episode or the passage that is connected to Ehud, who is more or less the first judge to get any full treatment. The previous judge is just dismissed in the paragraph. We're looking at chapter 3, verse 12 through to the end of the chapter. Now, what we get at the beginning of those verses is the standard template. The people do evil in the sight of the Lord. As a result, the Lord allows a bunch of foreigners to oppress them. The people are oppressed, in this case for 18 years, by the king of Moab. Then they cry to the Lord in their distress. The Lord sends them somebody who liberates them. And the person who is sent in this case is Ehud, son of Jerah, a Benjaminite, who was left-handed. This is a very interesting little detail, and presumably this little detail is rather important. It's not quite clear why it's so important, but because I think the story may have made more sense to the original audience than it does to us. Essentially, the story is that of a daring murder. Ehud takes the tribute that the Israelites have to pay to the king of Moab. Moab's on the other side of the Jordan. And he takes the tribute, and then he comes back with the tribute, without the tribute. But then, as soon as he crosses the Jordan, he turns back to the king, and he goes to the king, who's without his attendants, sitting in the upper room, which is cool, and he says, "I've got to tell you a secret." Well, this story is quite a good one, isn't it? Because if you remember, I think it's in Godfather 2 or Godfather 3, he said, "I've got to whisper something in your ear," and he pulls off the man's glasses and stabs him in the jugular with the glasses, if you remember. This idea so he gets the king on his own, and this is where he draws out his dagger, which is on his right side, with his left hand, and he sticks the dagger into the king's stomach, and the king was very fat. And the dagger goes in and sort of disappears into the amazingly fat king. Now, what I'm assuming here is that because the dagger was on his right side, where his left hand could get it, just try that for a moment, as opposed to on the usual side, the left side, where your right hand would grab it, like that. Therefore, when he was frisked, he was wearing a cloak as well. When he was frisked, they did not realize that he was armed. They assumed the weapon would be on the other side, but because he was left-handed, it was on the side they were not expecting. That seems to be the gist of the story. It's a good little story, it's a good little vignette, and also it's rather gruesome the way the dagger and the hilt disappears into this enormously fat man. Then, of course, he escapes via the privy. That is to say, he goes into the back room and he climbs out of the loo window and he escapes. Then the servants of the king are waiting for the king, and the door is locked, and then eventually they open the door and they discover the king is dead. They thought the king was on the loo because it says he was covering his feet on the loo. What a story. It really could be a mafia killing in New York in the 1940s, couldn't it, or 1930s? It is a Godfather-ish story. It's a pretty grim story, rather a good story. And you notice those tiny details. He was left-handed. He was very fat. The room upstairs was the cool room. The privies were at the back. The servants are too embarrassed to enter, wondering what's going on, and so on. Then Ehud escapes, and he sounds the horn in the highlands of Ephraim, the northern part of Israel. He gathers all the Israelites, and they then defeat the Moabites, who of course are in some disarray without their king. And then there's peace for 80 years, and the Moabites are humbled. So that's the story of the first judge that we really have any good stories about, Ehud. Now, then in chapter 4, we're told once Ehud was dead, the Israelites again began doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord handed them over to Jabin, king of Canaan. So, in other words, history repeats itself. History is cyclical. The judge is only for a time, and he's only able to establish the freedom of Israel for a time. Because, deep down, it's the people, really, who will make the difference by keeping the law of the Lord. You can actually blame the government, blame the judge, blame the oppressors and so on. But are you keeping the law of the Lord? That's the key question you should ask. It's a good story. I don't think it's got, to tell you the truth, much religious significance at all. It really is a story of a tribal society in which one tribe pulls a swift one on the other tribe and wins for a period. All the best then for now. I hope you've enjoyed that little story. Just goes to show what a good book, what an entertaining book, the Book of Judges is. And that's all fairly straightforward. It gets a lot more complicated from here in. Bye.